Hey guys, and welcome to Code with Stein. It's been a while since my last tutorial, so today we're going to begin with a basic Django tutorial and we're going to build a blog. I'm going to take you from A to Z, and we're going to begin with installation of Django and then finish off this video with deploying this to a live server at UpCloud. UpCloud is a fantastic cloud provider. They have really cheap servers and they're also very easy to use compared to many others I have tried. I have a link down in the description below. You can click with the promo code and then you will get a 7-day free trial. If I go into the pricing pages here, you can see that the cheapest servers are down to €3 per month. So that's very cheap for 1 gigabyte of memory, 1 CPU and storage. So let's come back to this later. To begin with, I just want to set up a to-do list of what we're going to go through today. So we're going to install and set up a Django project. Next, I want to create app for the blog. Set up Tailwind for the templates. When this is done, I want to create some database models for the posts or articles or whatever you want to call them. Next, we can list out posts, and then we can have a detailed page for posts. Then, when this is done, we can set up models for the comments. Make it possible to add comments to posts. And when this is done, we more or less have a ready blog for deployment. So if I don't get any more IDs, we are just going to head straight into deployment. And this is, first of all, create account on UpCloud. You can also use other providers if you want to do that. And then then create a server, install software we need there, create environment, move files from local to server. Then I think we need to set up Unicorn, which is sort of the web server for Django. Then we're going to use supervisor, which is something we use to make sure that Unicorn or Gunicorn or whatever you want to call it is always running in the background. And then Nginx. So Nginx is sort of the face out for the server out to the world. So when you go into a domain, we point that to this, and then that will transfer or proxy the traffic into Unicorn. And Nginx will also be used for hosting the media and static files. So this might be a little bit overwhelming right now, but I hope that when we go through this and I explain all of this in details, that it will make more sense to you. Before I continue, I just want to say thanks to all of my patrons. If you too want to support me, you will find a link in the description below. So let's just get started with installing and setting up a Django project. So I need to go to my command line. I have a folder here called blogged, but this is empty. I only have my to-do list. So to install Django, we need to begin with setting up a virtual environment. And to do this, I say Python 3-m venv, which stands for virtual environment, and then I pass in env, which is the name that I like to use for virtual environments. I think this is similar to how you do it in Windows. If not, you can just Google virtual environment and Windows and you will probably get a command for how you do it there. Then I hit enter and now it should be created. I have a new folder there, so I can activate it by saying source env bin activate. And then you can see the name of the environment in front of the folder we are in. So that means that every time that I now use the command pip to install Python packages, it will only be installed in this environment. That makes it much easier to handle updates and similar later when we are going to update or upgrade the project and also for the deployment. So let's install Django by saying pip install Django. As you can see here, we get a few other dependencies that Django has, like SQL parse, ASGIRF, and yes, that's actually it. And now we have Django installed here. So then we get a new command called Django-admin. And this is what we use to create empty Django project. So Django admin, start project, and then blogged. So if I now run ls to list out the folders here, you can see the environment, my to-do list, and then this. So if I go in here, you'll see that I have this manage.py file and then one more folder called blogged. I already opened this here in Cursor, which is my favorite editor. This manage.py is sort of like the brain, or what you would call, not sure what you actually would call it, but you use this to interact with your Django project from the command line. For example, if you need to create new Django apps or run migration scripts, etc. You'll see that we're going to use this a lot. In this blogged folder here, we have the ASGI and WSGI, which is entry points for the web server. So we're going to come back to these two later, or at least this one. This is for asynchronous requests, which we are not going to use. So we're only going to use this one. Settings.py is global configuration for the whole Django project. And urls.py is sort of like a table of contents for your whole project. So for example, here is one built in to Django called admin, which gives us an administrative interface where we can add content to the database model we're going to create later. So let's just come back to each of these files later when I have something to show you, which will make it easier to make sense of everything. But now we have done the first to do, so I can just set done on that one. Next is to create a new app for the blog. So let's just go back to the terminal and say Python, and then I'm going to use the manage.py file for the first time, start app, and then we can call this blog. So I want to have one app called blog, which will hold both the posts and also the comments. I think this is very good use of apps because it's very explanatory what blog means. You usually have posts and comments. You could have one app for post and one app for comment if you wanted to use comments in other parts. Let's say that you had a portfolio or similar as well, but this is how I do it now, and it can also be done in many other ways. So now Django knows that this app exists. Let's go through each of these files later when you actually have something to do inside them. So what we need to do now is to just think that Django now knows that this app exists, but it's not been instructed to use it. So if we go into settings.py, we can do some configuration here. You can see that we have a list of installed apps. Here are a few already coming from Django, like this admin interface. We have an app called auth, which makes it possible to have users. You have static files, which makes it possible to have static files in our project. Messages is for showing flash messages if you want to give some feedback to the user, etc. So at the bottom here, we can just pass in blog, which is the name of this folder. And we only have to say blog because we have this init file, which is a Python way to say that this folder should be treated as a module. So then blog is a folder, but it's also a module, if that makes sense. So then we can set this to done as well. Next step then is to set up Tailwind. So if I just go to Chrome, I have Tailwind open here, and I can go to Docs, installation. This can be done in a few different ways. You can use Vite, post CSS. You can also use Tailwind CLI, which is probably the easiest way if you're not just going to use the CDN, which is also very easy and what I think we can use in this tutorial. This CLI is a very easy way to use it as well, but since this is just a tutorial, we're just going to do this. So we can copy this file here, go back to cursor, and then inside the blog we create a new folder called templates, and then inside there one more called blog. And Django will automatically look for a folder called templates inside each of the apps that we have in a project. And the reason why we add one more folder inside there is to just separate these from other apps, which will make more sense if you have more than one app, but it's nice to follow this best practice anyway. So in here we create a new file called base.html and paste in the content. So now we just want to fix the indentation like that. So here you can see that we included version 4 of Tailwind, and then we can save this file. Now we have Tailwind. Let's just create a view for the front page. To do that, we create one more file here called index.html, which will serve as the front page for our blog, front page. And then we can go into views.py. And a view is where we, for example, we can get data from the database here, do something with it, and then render a template. So create a new view by saying def index, pass in request. The request contains information about the browser, if you have submitted a form, and similar. We are going to use that later in this tutorial, so then it will make a little bit more sense. Then here we can just say render, which is already imported from Django shortcuts, which makes it very easy to render a template to the user. And then in here we pass in the request parameter, so that's available to use inside the template, and then the template name, blog/index.html. This first name here, blog, is this folder, so it's not this one, but it's this one. Index is obviously this file, and save. But Django still doesn't know how to find this view. So if we in here create a new file called urls.py, we don't want to put this inside the main urls.file because to keep best practices in Django, we usually have one urls.py file inside each of the apps. So you can say from django.urls import path, and then we want to import all of the views here. So from .import views. So then we just imported this whole file, and URL patterns. Then we create a list and say path. So then we use this function we imported up here. And when the path is empty, which is, for example, if you just go to google.com, the path is empty, but google.com/posts, then the URL or path would be posts. Then we want to use views.index, and then we can give this a name, index as well. So that makes it easy to reference this other places in the Django project. Still, Django doesn't know how to find this urls.py file, so we just need to include that in here, and then we can test this. So when the path is empty, include blog.urls. And you can see that I get a warning here because include is not defined. We can import this up here together with path, and then the warning is gone. So the way that this works is that if you, for example, go to blog.com, it will not match this one, but it will match this one. And then it will go in here and find out, okay, there are no paths, so it will use this view. So now we can run the Django project or the server and test out. So then we just say python manage.py run server in one word. I get a warning here now, and I will fix that later. You can just ignore it for now. But you can see here now that we have started development server running at this IP address. So if you copy this, go back to Chrome and hit enter. Whoops. The view blog views index didn't return. It should be response. Okay, I did something wrong. Sorry, you have to say return render, of course. So if I now refresh, you'll see front page. So how do we get this inside here? Because we don't want to rewrite all of this for each of the templates we are going to use. So here I can say extends blog base.html, and then I will automatically get all of this HTML. And if I refresh now, you will see hello world and Tailwind is working. You see this hello world, but you can't see this front page anymore. And to fix this, we can remove this one here and add a Django template tag called block and give it the name of content and block. We can have as many of these as we want. So if we copy this now, go in here, paste that around this one, save, refresh, then we see front page, because everything we put in here now will be rendered in the base.html file inside here. Let's add one more just to show you what I mean. If I here say title, block, title, and block, save, that does not do anything to the URL or the browser tab up here. But if I here now say block, title, welcome to blogged, and block, save, refresh, then you can see it there. That means that this content here is rendered inside there, and this is rendered inside here. Can move this to one line just to keep it as tidy as possible. At least now we have a beginning of a Django blog. It doesn't look particularly good, so we can just add a little bit of elements to this page. So here we can add a nav at the top, give it a class of py6, so we get some space above and below the content, px12, so we have some spacings on each of the sides as well. Then we can set the background to be bg emerald 700, which is a deep greenish color. And then in here on the left side we can add a sort of a logo, arf, set it to go to the front page, give it a class of text white, blogged, and save. So if I refresh now, you see this green bar, which is the navigation with space, and this one is the link with text white. Great. And we can also add a little around this one, call this main class py6 px12. And then we wrap it around this one like that and save, refresh, so now we get some space there as well. Maybe we can have one link on the right side there, href, which can go to, for example, contact if we add that later. Contact. Okay, so now that appears there. How can we move it over there? For that, I want to use something called flexbox. So here we add flex. Now we can say justify between. So that means that when we justify between, we take all available space and put between these two. So we take everything of space in this element and put it in here, sort of. So I'm using this class text white on this one as well. And then we can make this a little bit larger. So text 3XL, save. And now you see that this is much larger than this, which is good, but you can see they are not directly on the same line anymore. And to fix that, we can say items center. So now they are on the same line. Perfect. Okay, so now we have set up Tailwind. We have added a little bit of it as well. So I think we can set this task to done and continue to setting up database models for the posts. So in here, I want to create one model for the post. So I just say class post and pass in models.model, which means that we are extending a Django class that comes from Django. And I think that all blog posts should have a title, and this should be a char field, which is used for example, titles or names. You need to set a max length. You can set it to 255. We need to set this because all char fields in Django are mandatory to have a max length. And then I want a slug, models.slug field. This doesn't need a max length. And a slug field is, for example, if the title is hello world, then the slug field or slug would be hello world. So it's there to be inside the URLs or the browser, typically up here. You can see here, play CD, and this is the slug. And then I think the posts should have a content equals models dot text field. And the text field is almost the same as a char field, that it just doesn't have a maximum or any limitations. It can be 10,000 characters if you wanted to do that. Not all databases supports char fields more lengthy than 255. Then we want to know when this was created. So created at equals models dot date time field auto now add equals true. There's a typo. And when I add this auto now add is true, is that every time that we add one of these to the database, this field will be automatically filled out with the timestamp now. So we can save this. We can add some more on this a little bit later in this tutorial. So if we now stop, we will also fix this now. And we do this by saying Python manage.py make migrations. Then you can see down here that we want to create a new model called post. If I open up this file, you can see here that this is the SQL, or what you want to call it, that will be created. So now Django knows what this database table should look like, what it should instruct the database to do. And then we just need to say Python manage.py migrate to actually create the database and to create these tables inside the database. So if I go back to cursor now, you should see that I get a new file here called db.sqlite3. It will not make any sense to open it here, but it will contain everything that we need. Great. So, yeah, before we set this to done, I want to make it possible to log into the admin interface so we can actually add a few Django posts to show. And to do that, we first need to create a user that can access the admin interface. So Python manage.py create super user admin blog.com, like that. So now we have a user we can use, and then we just need to run the server again. So run server, and then we have it there. If I now go to the browser and go to /admin, then I can log in with the user I just created. Then you can see here that we have a list of users and a list of groups. The groups are not in use here, but they will be there automatically from Django. So why doesn't the post model show here? That's because we have not registered it with the admin interface yet. So just open up the admin.py file inside the blog app and say from.models import post. So we just import the model we created. And then it's as easy as just saying admin.site.register post. Save, go back and refresh, and then blog, the app appeared here, and the model post appeared there. Let's create one. My first blog post. This is the content of my first blog post. And save. Okay, so post object 1 doesn't make any sense. We don't understand what this actually does. This is sort of the object name of the class, I think. So we can change this by going into models.py and saying def __str __, pass in self and say return self.title. Refresh. Great. So now my first blog post. Much easier to understand what this actually is. My second, and just add some random information here. Now you can see here my second, my first. So now you understand which one it is you want to click to make changes to. You can also delete them if you wanted to do that. So now I think that we can set this task here to done. So the next step then will be to list out the posts on the front page of the blog. And to do that, we need to first go into views.py and import the model here. So from .models, import post, and then we can get all posts here by saying posts equals post.objects.all. So we just get all from the database. Then we can pass them into the template here by saying posts. This is the name that we can use in the template. So we just need to insert a string here. It can be whatever you want, but posts make sense. And this is this variable. And save. So if you now go to index.html, we can say here for post in posts, then this posts here refers to this name that we used there. I can say h2 class text xl, pass in post.title. So this post here is this one, of course, and this post here is an instance of this class. That's why we can just say post.title to get the value there. And for, and save, go back there. Then we have my first blog post, my second blog post. Maybe we want the newest one to appear first, so that means that we need to reorder this. We can go back to the model to do this. We could do it here by saying order by minus created at. Minus is used to say descending, which means that we want the biggest value first. So you can see that's working like that. Or just want to reset it like that. We can go in here and set class meta, which is sort of configuration for this model here. Then we just say ordering equals minus created at, and add the comma here since this is a tuple. If we say now the default ordering of this blog post will be that the newest one comes first everywhere that we use it, so we can just say all here, which makes it very easy to use them. Then let's make this a little bit better by adding a new div here. Class grid calls 3 gap 6. Now we have a little grid there, and then each of these can have a div class p-6, so we have space all around inside here. pg gray 100, like that. Great. So this doesn't look particularly good, but that's not the point of this tutorial anyway. Below the title we can have a read more button. So href, let's just set this to empty for now. Class text emerald 700, so we reuse the color from the menu. Read more, and then we add some space between these by saying mb-6, margin bottom 6. Okay, so this will work right now, but you get the idea. So now we are listing out the blog posts on the front page, which means that we can set this to done. Next step then will be to create a detail page for the posts. So then we need to create one more view for this. We can call this detail just to make it easy to understand what it does. Here we pass in the request parameter, and then we say post equals get object or 404. Pass in post and slug equals slug. So here are a few new things. First we get a warning here. This is sort of the same as saying post equals post.objects.get slug equals slug. But this will actually crash the website if this slug doesn't exist. That's why we want to use this function, which will just give you a 404 page if the slug doesn't exist. So we need to import this together with render, because getObject or 404 is a shortcut built in to Django. Then this slug here, that is the field that we have on the model there. And then this one needs to be pulled from the URL up here. And to do that, we can just say slug there, then the warning is gone. Next, we want to set up the template for this. Return render, pass in the request parameter, blog detail.html. Then we can pass in the post. You see we use singular name here since this is just one particular blog post. And save. Before I create the template for this, I just want to set up the URLs. So we can add that above here, path. And when the path contains a slug called slug, then we want to use views.detail and name is detail. So slug, the first slug here, that is that we are expecting a slug. This could be str for a string, or it could be int if we are expecting an integer, but we are expecting a slug and Django understands what this is. The second name slug there is just what we are referring to up here. So it could be pk for primary key and rename it pk there as well, but slug is much easier to understand if you do the same thing both places. So let's create the template, detail.html. We are going to extend the template base here as well. So extends blog/base.html. Then we can set the title here, block title. And here we want to pass in the name or the title of the blog post. So post.title and block content and block. And at the top of the page here, we maybe need to create, no, we don't have to copy anything there. We can just say h1 class text 3xl. Then we can say post.title and save for now. Now we add the rest later. Now it should be ready to use. So if I now just go to /my_second, we will see the detailed page of this. And I can click here to be sent to the front page. So let's just fix this button here now by going in here, and then we create a new Django tag called URL. And we want to link to the page called detail, and to pass in the slug we just say post.slug here. So now Django will use a function called URL to locate this URL here, or path, which is this one, detail, and we pass in post.slug, which is passed in there, and then it's passed into the view here, and we use it to get it from the database. So then we can save now, go back and refresh, and I can click this and I will be sent to my first blog post. Perfect. Below here we can show the date for when this was added and then the details or the content. So here we say span class text sm for small and text gray 500 post.created_at. And below here again we can say div class text lg, and then post.content. Save. Refresh, then we see the date there and the full blog post. If I go in here, you'll see the content of that one. Nice. We can have some more space between these, so this can have empty-8, refresh, and then we get some spacing between there. Nice. Okay, so now we have a detailed page, we have a listing page, which means that we can set this to done. Then the next step here says that this should be adding models for the comments. So that means that we need to go into the models.py file and create one more model. Class comment models.model, which will be used again. Whoops. And there we need a reference up to the post. So we can say post equals models.foreign key, which is how you refer to other models. Pass in post, which is just this one. Set something called the related name to comments, which makes it very easy to get all of the comments belonging to one specific post. And at the end here we say on delete models.cascade, which means that if we delete a post, we also delete all of the comments belonging to this post, so that the database will not be filled up with comments not belonging to anything. We need to know who created the comment, so name models.char field max length 255, and the content, let's just copy that from there, and when the comment was created. Here we also want the newest one on top, so we can do it like this, and we can create a string representation of this as well. But here we want the name, but also which post this belongs to. So let's create a formatted string, and here we can say name, or sorry, self.name and self.post.title. So then we get the name of the commenter and the title of the post automatically. So then we can update the database again. So stop the server and say python mentioned.py make migrations, and python mentioned.py migrate. Great. Now we can just run the server again, so we have it in the background. Go back here and register this with admin interface. Comment and admin.site.register comment. If I now go into the admin interface again, like that, you can now see that comments has appeared here. Yeah, I don't want to add any of them here because I want to be able to do this from the front end, of course. But now we have the database model for this. We can set this to done. Next step then is to make it possible to add comments to a post. And to do that we need a form, and to follow best practices we are going to create a form using a model form, which is a function from Django. So let's create a new file here called forms.py, and then we can say from Django.forms import model form, and then we want to import the comment model from .models import comment, and we can say .models since we are in the same folder as this file here. Then we create a class for the form, so we can say comment form, and then we pass in model form, so Django knows that we will be extending this. Then we need to use the meta class for configuring this. So here we say model equals comment, because that's the comment, or that's the model, sorry, we are going to use, and which fields we want the user to be able and has to fill out. So here we say name and content. And if we go back here now, you can see that this will be automatically added, so we can just ignore that. This needs to be added manually later, and I will show you exactly how to do that. But now we have the comment form, which looks very easy. I hope everything here is understandable. So now we just need to go into views.py and use it in the detail view. So here we can say from .forms import comment form, and then we can check below here if the user has submitted the form or not. And to do that we say if request.method. There you can see that we are finally using the request parameter here. This will check if the method of the request is post, which means that the form has been posted, or it can be get it can be files, etc. But when a form is submitted, it's always post. Then we can say form, then we can say comment equals form dot. Then here we create an instance of the form by saying form equals comment form and just pass in request.post. Then all of the information inside this here will be just automatically pushed into this form, and Django will handle verification, sanitation of the data, etc. for us. Now you can check if this is valid by saying if form.is_valid. Then we know that the form has been correctly filled out by the users. Then we can say comment equals form.save. But what happens now is that the database will crash because this field here is required to be filled in. So we need to just pass in here commit equals false. That means that we are creating an instance of the saved form, but it will not be pushed into the database yet. Before we do it, we can say comment.post equals post. So we fill in this here now manually with this post here. And then we can say comment.save. And that's when it's saved to the database. And after this, we can redirect the user back to the blog detail page. So return. Then we use a new function here called redirect. And then you see I get a warning here. We can import this at the top here, because this is also a shortcut from Django. And we want to redirect us back to the detail page. Then we need to specify the slug again, and that's as easy as just saying slug equals slug. If, on the other hand, the request method is get, we can say else form equals comment form, and then we just have an empty instance of the form which we can show to the user. Now we pass it in here so it can be used inside the template. If I go back here now and refresh, you will see no difference. So below here we can say div class empty8, and then we can render the form method, set this to post because we want to post this and not use get, because get should usually just be used for getting information. And action can be set to dot, which is the page we are on right now. We are using Django, which handles a lot of security for us, but to make it easy or possible for Django to know that we are posting from the page we are on, we need to pass in something called here CSRF token. This stands for cross-site request forgery, which means that if you try to submit to this form from a different URL, it will not be working. So it sets a cookie and sends the information to the backend. Then we can say form.s_p. So the form will be rendered as paragraphs. Save, go back and refresh. And then we kind of see the form here. You see the name. You can't see the because Tailwind removes all of the styling automatically. Then below here we can add a button class py4, so there's a space above and below, px8 bg emerald 700 and text white. Submit. Okay, so now we at least have a button for submitting this. We could add a background color to this input field, so it's a little bit easier to see at least. Let me just ask the AI how I do this, because I always forget. How can I add some classes to the fields? So yes, I just need to override like this and paste it above here. Class name, we can set the BG gray 100, BG gray 100 and save. Let's go back and see if that works. Yes, great. W-full yes, that sets it to a separate line as well, w-full, and we can have some space inside them as well. So that makes them look a little bit better at least. Then I just want to have some space between all of these fields, and that is done in the detail page. In this form we can say class space y4. That means it's adding 4 of spaces between each of the elements in there. Great. So Stein, let's add a comment. Nothing happened. Let's go to the terminal. You can see here that we had a successful post request there, which means that if I go here, there will be one comment added by Stein in the my second article. Perfect. So that means that we are now able to send or add comments here. So let's go to the to-do list and set this to done. Maybe we should be able to show comments on a post page, and I also want to do some optimizations as well. So we can begin by making it possible to show the comments. Going into detail, we can have this above or below the comment form. Maybe we should have it below HR, and then we can say for comment in post.comments.all. So it's very easy to get all of the comments for one specific post like this. Then you can say div class py4 px6 bg gray 100. So we have some background color to this. At the top we can have a h3 class font bold comment.name at comment.created at. So then we know when the comment was added, sorry, double curly braces, and then below here we can show the comment content. So comment.content. Save, go back and refresh, and then you see it there. Okay, this HR needs some space. Class my in both directions 8, and also I think that each of the comments should have some space between them if there are more than one, so space y4, and yes, like that. Let's just add one more for testing. Like you see, the newest one is at the top. Perfect. Okay, this date does not look good when it's on a comment, so here we can say time ago. I think it's the correct one. Or time since, maybe. Yes, it's 0 minutes since, 3 minutes. Now we can say ago at the end there. And the same up here, we could do some filtering on this one, date, and say, for example, d.m.y. Then we get the date, the day, the month, and the year. A little bit better formatting of the date. Okay, so now we can show the comments as well, but let's go into the first one, which doesn't have any blog posts. Let's show an information to that as well. So here you can say empty. So if there are no comments, it will show this here instead. We can copy this. No comments yet. Close that one, save and refresh, and then we have this div down there. Perfect. Okay, so now we more or less have a complete blog, but I want to do some optimizations. For example, this is something that we would like to put in a separate file. So in here we can create a new folder called partials, and then in there post.html, and then we just post this like that. And then instead of having this, we can say include blog, which is this folder there, partials post.html. Save, refresh, So that looks the same, but the code is a little bit better. And this is something you could do for example, the comments as well, and probably a lot of more things as you keep building this project. And the good thing about this is that, for example, if you have a search on this blog, we could reuse this, and now we know that it will look the same on all places that the teaser for a blog post is showing. And if you want to do some changes, you only have to do that one place, which means that now we can set this to done. So now we have a very simple blog. Next step then is to start the deployment. First step is to create an account on UpCloud. If you want to try UpCloud yourself, you can just go to upcloud.com or click the link in the description below and go to sign up, and down here you can see have a promo code and type in code with Stein 50 and you will get $50 to test out their services. I have already created my account, so when you're finished, go ahead and continue. And you just go to that, click it, and create a new account. Once you have signed up, you will get a 7-day free trial, so you can just follow along and try to deploy together with me. I have already done this, so I can just set this to done. So just come back when you are ready, and we can start by creating the server. So when you have logged in, you will see a page similar to this. Next, you can go to servers and click deploy server. The location you choose is typically one as close as possible to where you think your users will be. I am currently located in Norway, so the closest one to me is this one in Sweden. You can select the cheapest server if you want to do that. I go for this, so I get a little bit more memory. You don't have to do that. You can also select general purpose or cloud native if you wanted to do that. Down here you can add storage to your server if you want to have more. Typically that's used if you need one for very big images and similar. You can have automated backups. This will take daily backups for 24 hours, and that's just adding this sum on top of your monthly budget. Next, we select which operating system we are going to use. I see here that Ubuntu 24.04 was automatically selected, and that's the one that I want to go for. This is an LTS, which stands for long-term support, which means that this will probably be good for another 4 or 5 years, I think it is. Then I want a public IP4. You can use the utility network. This is probably not something I want to use, but it can just be enabled automatically anyway. Optionals, what is this? Actually not quite sure what this is, but since this is optional, you don't have to think about it right now. Next, I want to log in with my... You can use SSH keys, which is probably the easiest thing to do, or you can set up no, you cannot set up a one-time password. So let's add an SSH key from my computer. Call this Mac, and then go to the terminal and say cat.ssh id pub id ed. They come with a few different names, but this is my public key, and then just paste it there and save. So now I have added this, and that means that I can automatically log in from my computer without using a password. I don't have any scripts for initializing. I guess this is, for example, installing software when you have created a server. I'm not going to use that. You can set up a host name, blogged server, and blogged server. I only want one, so that means that I now can just click deploy, and then this will just take a few minutes and I should be able to go to the next step. You can see here that it is being deployed or created, would maybe make more sense to call it. So the server has been created now. I just clicked on it and you can see it has been created. The server has started and the status is now started. Great. Now that means that everything should be ready to be used. So if I just copy this IP address, go back to terminal, then I can say here SSH root, which is the default username, paste in the IP address, hit enter and select yes. Okay, so now this should be ready. So now I have created a server as well and I can set this to done. Next step then is to create or install the software we are going to need. If you think this is a little bit much to follow right now, I would suggest that you just try to do this a couple of times and it will start making more sense. And even if you don't understand everything, just keep doing it, and maybe you don't have to understand everything actually, you just do it. So then you say apt install. First you just want to update the server by saying apt update, just to make sure that all of the packages which are already installed there are up to date. And apt upgrade. Yes, you can see here there are a lot of packages that needed upgrading. Okay, so now everything should be ready and we can start installing what we are going to need. To do that we say apt install and we're going to use something called Python 3 pip, which is used for installing packages like we did locally. Python 3 dev, which includes a few things we need as well. We're also going to need Nginx, which is the web server, and we're going to use supervisor. Gunicorn, as I said earlier, will be installed using pip. So let's just hit enter. Yes. Just want to go back to my to-do list, create environment. Yes. Create users and group, because we need a user for this as well. And then we can say mkdir /webapps and webapps /blogged. I like to call the root folder webapps because you probably want more than one Django app on your server at one point. So then I like to call the webapps the root where all of them are belonging. And then when I'm located here now, I can go back and set this to done, because now we have the software, and then we can create a user. And because we don't want root to be running things on this server when we are using websites. So here we can say group add -- system and give the name of webapps. So we add a group called webapps to the system, hit enter. And then I want a user, so user add -- system -- gid. The group ID is webapps, which means that we want to add this user to the group ID called webapps, which is just created there. We want this user to be using shell bin /bash, and we can set the home folder for this as well to just say --home, and the webapps /blogged. The home for this user should be this folder here. And then we add the name of the user, which I like to be blogged user, just so I know that this is not a folder, it's the username. So this username belongs to this folder. It uses the bash as the shell and it belongs inside the webapps group. So then you can set this to done as well. The next step then is to create an environment just like we did locally. So Python env, Python 3 -m venv env. Okay, so I forgot to install something. You need to install Python 3 venv. Okay, so let me just copy this, paste and hit enter. And yes, I want to install this. And when that's done, I can run this command again. Just click 2 times up on my keyboard and hit enter. And now I have this there. Perfect. So let's activate this by saying source env bin activate. Then we can install Django here as well. So pip install Django. And then I will get the same version as I have locally. Perfect, because I use the same version of Python and everything should be up to date right now. So now we have the environment like that. Next step then is to move all of the files from local to the server. So if I just stop the server here now, I can go up one folder and then I want to move this whole folder in there. To do that, I'm going to use a command called scp, which on the Mac at least is working. There is probably something similar on Windows as well. And I need to add one parameter called -r, because this should be recursive because I'm moving a whole folder. And then this folder here, blogged, should be moved, and I want to move this, and I want to use the root user and then the IP address for this server. So let me just copy this again. So we move this folder and we're going to move it to this IP address using this user set colon and then web apps /blogged, because we want to move it into that folder /dot. So that's the whole command. Hit enter. And I don't have to log in now since we are using the SSH key. And as you can see now, we are moving one and one folder. Sorry, one and one file. If you wanted, you could send this to GitHub, for example, and then pull it down from there, which is probably the best way to work like this, but that is not a part of this tutorial. So now you can see that I have this folder here called blogged, and we have one folder called env. And if I run ls-lart, you will see that root is owning all of this. But we don't want the root user to own this. We want the blogged user inside the web apps to be owning everything here. But before we change the ownership, I just want to set mkdir to, create one more folder called logs. And then if I now run chown, which stands for change owner, -r needs capital R, web apps colon, maybe it's blogged user colon web apps dot. So what happened now is that we are running change over ownership recursively and set the owner to be this inside this group on this folder and everything below. So if I run this command again now, you will see that this user and this group owns everything in here, which means that now we should be able to run things much better and smoothly here. If I go to the to-do list, I can set this to done, and then we need to set up the G-Unicorn web server. And to do that, we can create a new file here and then just move it over. So we say hash !bin/sh, because this is a shell script. Then we set the name to be blogged, which is the name of our project, the Django dir, which is you can see here /webapps/blogged/blogged. That's the URL to our Django folder. And sock file, which has not been created yet, this will be automatically created by G-Unicorn. Sorry, we are not going to use like that. So like that, and then we say /webapps/blogged/env run /gunicorn.sock. So this will be automatically created. And then a user, which is blogged user, so it knows which user to actually create this file. The group we want to use is web apps, and something called num workers is 3, and 3 means that we have one CPU on this, and you multiply that by 2 and add 1. So if you have 2 CPU cores, you would set this number to 5. It just means how many instances of this Django project we can use. Django settings module equals blogged.settings. So we just want to refer to the settings file, this one, inside this folder, and Django WSGI module equals blogged.wsgi. So that just points to this file. So you don't have to think about what's happening in here. It just takes a little bit information and pass it along. And then we set the timeout to be 120 seconds in case there's something wrong. Now we just need to start telling the script what it should do. So first we want to send the user into the Django folder. So cd, and then we use this this variable Django there. So we send the user into web apps blogged. And when the user or this script is inside there, we want to activate the environment by saying source /env bin activate. And that means that it goes out of this into this folder, into this, and bin and activate, just like we do locally. And now we need to export a few things from this environment into the shell. And we do that by saying export Django settings, not settings model, it's supposed to be module, sorry, like that, equals Django settings module. So what happens here is that we are reusing this variable here and exporting it to the command line. We do that with one more Python path. Here we are actually just setting this or adding it to the Python path, Django there, Python path. So what happens here now is that we take the Python path that already is on the environment here. I think if I say this, okay, it will not find it, don't worry about that, but it should be inside somewhere on the server, and it adds the Django there to this one. Run there equals $, their name, $sock file. So this is the run directory. And then we test to see if this actually exists. Test D, run there, if not mk there, -p, run there. So what happens here is that it checks if this folder exists. If not, it will create it. And then we execute the gunicorn script, exec /env bin gunicorn. I'm here, $, curly braces, Django WSGI module, application. So it starts the application that's set in here, which is the Django app itself. Add the / here, name, so we set the name so it's easier for us to understand what's happening. Take one parameter per line so it's easy to see. Workers, here you could set 3 if you wanted to do that, but I like to define stuff up here because that makes it easier later when you want to do customizations. Timeout, user is user. So here we can see that we are using an equal sign. That's not necessarily used on all of these. And then the group equals group, and we need to set bind equals Unix sock file. Then what we are going to log, so log level equals debug, and last but not least log file equals minus, so it's just put out into a file which you are going to set later. So if we copy everything here now, go back to the command line, we can say vi to create a new file, env bin gunicorn underscore start. Click I to start the insert as you see down here and paste everything. Then we can click escape and colon WS for write and quit, sorry, WQ. Then we just need to run this again. Shouldn't have done it before now. And we need to make this file executable as well. So ch mod plus x makes it writable, and paste it in. Then we can try to execute it. So you can see this was not found because we have not installed gunicorn yet. We can do that by saying pip install gunicorn. Then we can try to execute this again, and then you see that the server started. There is no error messages or similar, which means that everything should be working so far. Now that we stop this, Django isn't running anymore, and that is where supervisor will come in handy. So let's just set this to done. Let's go back. We have installed gunicorn. We just need to create a very short script. So we can create that here as well. Add some square brackets, program blogged. The command we are going to use is web apps blogged and then env bin gunicorn underscore start. So the file we just created. Which user to execute this, which is blogged user, std out log file, because we want to log if there is anything wrong with supervisor. Web apps / blogged / logs / supervisor.log. Redirect std error, which means that we want to show everything of errors inside there. Environment equals lang equals en underscore us dot utf dash 8 comma lc all equals en underscore us dot utf 8. So we just set the environment and we want everything there to be English following the UTF-8 rule. So let's copy this, create one more file, vi / etc supervisor / conf, and in here we create a new file called blogged.conf. So vi etc supervisor / conf.d / blogged.conf and hit enter. Click I to insert and paste, escape colon WQ. And then we say supervisor ctl read to see if yes, this name is available and there is no errors. Supervisor ctl update. Okay, so the blog was added to the group status. So this is now starting. This is now running, so it looks like everything is okay. So there are no errors, as we can see, which means that now this gunicorn hopefully is running in the background. Great. Then we actually have just one more step before we can test this, and that is to set up Nginx. So we need one last file here. Upstream blogged app server, not equals but curly braces, and here we need to set up Unix again to point to the gunicorn sock file that was created here. We want to point to this one. To do that we say server unix colon / web apps / blogged / env run / gunicorn dot sock fail timeout equals 0, because this file has to exist before we can continue. Now we set up a new server in Nginx, listen to port 80, which is regular HTTP. If you want HTTPS, you need to add HTTP. Sorry, if you need HTTPS, you need to listen to port 443. Server name is blogged.com. I don't own this, but I can make my Mac believe that I do. Then we set up an access log, web apps /blogged /logs /access log. That's one too many, like that. And an error log if there's anything wrong with the Nginx server. Error.log. And then we set location / so if all the traffic should be point in here, now we need to set something called proxy set header x-forwarded -4 proxy _add _x _forwarded _4. It might not be very easy to understand all of this, and I don't really understand it myself, but this is what I do for all Django page that I am hosting, and I'm hosting a lot of them, and it seems to be working. So we need to set the proxy set header to host HTTP host. One more proxy, which is proxy redirect _off, not _space. And then one more thing, if not -f, so if this is not a file name, then we will redirect everything to the Gunicorn server. Request _file name, proxy _pass, HTTP : / and then this blogged app server. So yes, we have this upstream to just connect to the Gunicorn server. We listen to port 80 on this domain. We have access log and error log. All requests should have these proxies here, which just forwards traffic into this Gunicorn socket if it is not a file name. So let's copy everything here now. Go, and we can cd to etc nginx sites available, and then we create a new file here called, or we use vi to create it, vi blogged.conf. Paste it again here like we done previously. Save and quit. Go up one folder and into sites enabled. And here I just want to delete this default page, which is already there. And then we create a link to this file by saying ln-s, which is a symbolic link, /sites available . So if I now run this, you can see that this oops, that was not what I was supposed to do. ln-s available blogged. This is the one that I was going to do it with, like that. So now this file is located here and it points to this one. So now I can say service nginx start. And there's no errors, which means that it looks like everything is working. So if I now go to blogged.com, I just get an error because this page doesn't actually exist. That's kind of good. So let me just make sure that my computer thinks that I own this page by saying sudo vi etc hosts, and then the password for my computer. And then at the end here, I can paste in the IP address for my server, or you need to copy yours, of course. Go in here and say blogged.com. If I save now, go back and refresh, you'll see welcome to Nginx, which is sort of good because now I'm at least pointed to this server. but why am I seeing that page and not my own? Service, Nginx restart, and then refresh, and now good. Now I get a 502 bad gateway. That means that I'm now using this at least, but why am I getting a bad gateway? Let's go into /webapps/blogged and tail logs error. You can see that it couldn't find this file. So tail logs supervisor. It had not permission to start. Okay, so if I then say supervisor ctl status, it says running, so why is it not working? Let's try restarting the supervisor restart all. Sorry, supervisor ctl restart all. Then we can run the status again. It says that it is run starting. Still get the same error. So it still has problem with this because it can't connect, because it gets permission denied. Yes, here you can see that this run folder was created by root. Okay, so let's try to run this chown again and then restart. If I now run lslart on this, you can see that we are owning this now with this user. That is good. Restart, and now I get a different error. This is kind of good because now I just see that this is not added to my settings.py file. I can either go in here or I can do it directly on the server. I think I will do that. vi blogged settings, logged settings.py. If I here search now for allowed hosts, then in here I can add blogged.com. Save and quit, and then I need to restart blogged here. So supervisor ctl restart blogged. Every time you do a Python change, you need to do this. If not, it will not be in effect. So you can see that my blog is running on blogged.com. Perfect. Try to add a comment, and then it was added there like that. Nice. So that's how easy you can build a blog using Django and deploy it to a cloud service like UpCloud. And it's very cheap to host pages here, so I recommend that you try doing it. Hope you liked this tutorial, and if you have any questions about code or deployment or UpCloud or similar, feel free to leave a comment below and I will answer as soon as I can. See you in the next video.